Hello, students. This is lesson 4 of Jones Grammar. In this lesson, we're covering pronouns, and we're not discussing all of the pronouns, but we're discussing the personal, possessive, and reflexive pronouns. There are a lot of others that we'll need to talk about in future lessons. These are the most basic pronouns. And an important word or concept that goes along with pronoun is antecedent. So we'll talk about pronouns first. A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun. Most 11th graders know that when they come into the 11th grade year. Many of you, however, have not yet heard about antecedents. An antecedent is the word or words to which a pronoun refers. Here's an example of pronouns and antecedents. John parked his bicycle in front of the 7-Eleven and walked in to buy a drink. Unfortunately, he forgot to lock it up and it was stolen. Well, in this sentence, the antecedent of he in that second sentence is John. The antecedent of it, which you see twice in the second sentence, is bicycle. So that's it. Antecedent is maybe a somewhat challenging word to remember and to spell and pronounce. However, it's a very simple concept. It is just whatever the pronoun is referring to. Personal pronouns. Here's a definition for personal pronoun because, as I said, there are different types of pronouns. A personal pronoun is a pronoun that replaces a person or a thing. There are 3 types of personal pronouns. There is a nominative pronoun, also called a subject pronoun. And a nominative pronoun is a pronoun lying in the subject position of the sentence. In other words, it's usually the thing that's coming before the verb and is sort of in control of the verb. Now I'm going to tell you we have these 2 different terms, nominative and subject. I think it's much easier to remember subject. So you generally, with my students, I like to use the term subject pronoun rather than nominative pronoun. In fact, I'm going to be referring to it for the rest of this lesson as a subject pronoun. An objective or object pronoun is a pronoun lying in the object position of the sentence. In other words, it is normally the pronoun coming after the verb and receiving the verb's action. And again, we can say objective or we can say object. I just like the term object pronoun because then you remember subject as the noun or pronoun coming before the verb, object as the noun or pronoun coming after the verb, and it's easier just to remember these terms, subject pronoun, object pronoun. Finally, we have possessive pronouns. Possessive pronoun is a pronoun that shows possession. All right, we'll see some examples of the 3 types of personal pronouns. He is proud of his daughter. In this sentence, he is a nominative or subject pronoun because it is the subject of the verb is, right? It is the pronoun that is controlling the verb is. It's the subject pronoun. Second example, John gave it to his mother. In this sentence, it is an objective or object pronoun because it is the object of the verb gave, right? Molly gave her extra pencil to the girl sitting next to her. In this sentence, her, at least the first her, is a possessive pronoun because it shows possession of the direct object, pencil. Because it is coming before a noun, it is also considered an adjective. Now, if you look at the first 2 sentences, in fact, there are also possessive adjectives in those sentences. The top sentence, once again, he is proud of his daughter. His is a possessive pronoun. And as we said in the definition, his in this first sentence is also considered an adjective because it's coming before a noun, daughter, and it's describing or modifying it. Same in the second sentence, John gave it to his mother. His is a possessive pronoun, an adjective modifying mother. So those are the three types of personal pronouns. We also have these other pronouns that we're going to cover in this lesson called reflexive or intensive pronouns. And these are the words that end with self. And there is a difference between these two different types. A reflexive pronoun refers back to the subject of the sentence and indicates that the same person or thing is involved. It is normally in the object position. As in this sentence, Bob didn't trust himself to answer the question correctly. Himself there is the reflexive pronoun. And it's in the object position. It's coming right after the verb trust. So you can think of the others, myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, themselves. We'll see a list of these in a minute. Now these same self words are also intensive pronouns. An intensive pronoun adds emphasis to a noun or pronoun. As in this sentence, he cleaned the room himself. Why do we say this word himself at the end? Well, it's because we are emphasizing that he did it, that he's the one who did it, rather than say his mother, right? So sometimes these self words are reflexive, sometimes they are intensive. I don't really care that you remember these two terms, reflexive and intensive, and remember which is which. That's not so important to me. We will talk about something that is very important with these words, however, a little further below. Now, here we have, and this is where we get into some more technical language, and this is all stuff that you guys have been exposed to at one time or another throughout your education. And it's here we really need to put them all together, because what we find with pronouns is that many high school juniors and seniors are still using the incorrect pronouns. Like very often they are using subject pronouns when they should be using object pronouns, and vice versa. And there are also, as we'll talk about in a minute, a lot of incorrect pronoun forms out there which we use in conversation very frequently, but we shouldn't use in formal writing. And so this is where you're really going to need to do a little bit of memorization, perhaps, to get some of this terminology down. And the personal pronouns come in different categories, and we'll talk about the first person pronoun first. And you remember, you've all heard about first and second and third person, which you will often discuss, for instance, when we're talking about narrative. And is this a first person narrative, for instance, in which a character is always using the word I and seeing things from his perspective, the narrator, that is? Or is it a third person where the narrator is not a character in the story and he or she is using the word he and she to describe the characters rather than I? Well, you all understand that, but we also need to analyze our use of pronouns in terms of first, second, third person, because they each have their own forms. All right, so we have the first person singular first, and the forms are I, me, my, mine, and myself. We'll see these laid out in a table a little bit. I'm just sort of introducing them to you in this way so that you can start getting used to the idea that there are rows, we might say, into which the personal pronouns can be divided based on first, second, and third person. First person plural would be we, us, our, ours, ourselves. Second person singular and plural, because in English they are the same. You, your, yours, yourselves. And there is a word that I'm missing in here. In fact, I'm going to step back to my computer. This is a little mistake on my part, and I'm going to type in yourself, right? Because when we're only talking about, when we're only addressing one person, we're talking about yourself. But when we are addressing several people, we're talking about yourselves, right? But apart from the intensive reflexive self pronouns. Let me get that back up here. Apart from those, the first four, you, your, yours, they are the same. And we might want to talk a little bit about that once I'm finished introducing these pronouns. We might want to come back to the second person because it's easy for us to get confused about that for reasons I'll describe in a minute. Now, third person singular, and guys, this is where in English, when we have third person, we also have three different types. We have masculine, we have feminine, and we have neuter pronouns. And this is only for third person. Some languages actually have first person singular, masculine, and neuter, so you have to change your pronouns you're using when you're talking about yourself, depending on if you're a man or a woman, or a thing even, right? Same with second person. But in English, we only have to worry about genders, these are called, masculine and feminine neuter genders. We only have to worry about genders for third person pronouns, right? Third person singular masculine pronouns are he, him, his, himself. And we'll find out in a minute why we repeat his. And third person singular feminine, she, her, hers, herself. Again, there are two HERs in there, and we'll talk about why that is in just a minute. And third person singular neuter, it's itself. Finally, we have the third person plural. And here's the other thing, guys, is when we're talking about plural in English, unlike other languages, there is no gender. There's only one. There's no masculine, feminine, and neuter when there are more than one. It's the same thing. They, them, their, theirs, themselves. Think about it. You can do that for if you're discussing women, if you're discussing men, or if you're discussing chairs or whatever. Okay. Now, here is a big table, and I'm afraid, people, that at some point you're going to have to memorize this table, because once again, high school juniors and seniors make many, many mistakes in their use of personal pronouns. And it's at this time in your lives when you really have to get rid of the incorrect forms that you use, at least in your writing. And the best way to do this is just to memorize this chart. Okay? And this is a very standard way to do things. We have the singular pronouns in the first 5 rows over on the left, first person, second person, and then third person, masculine, feminine, neuter. And underneath that, we have the plural, first person plural, second person plural, third person plural. Now, when I was a kid, way back in probably 5th or 6th grade, we had to do this. We had to memorize the pronouns. And for instance, the teacher would always recommend that you memorize in 2 different ways. First vertically, and then there'd be this little drill where the teacher would say, okay, what are the subject pronouns? And you just say that, I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. And we could all do that. And then also you memorize going across. For instance, first person singular, I, me, my, mine, myself. Okay. Now, the best way that I think, when you're first, and here's the other thing, you all have these forms in your brain, English is your first language, but the problem is they're jumbled, and you have a difficult time often remembering. You get into certain situations where you're not sure which one you need to use, which one is correct. And there's a little mnemonic device that I would like to recommend. Mnemonic is an adjective for memory, if you're not unfamiliar with that word. So in other words, a little memory device, and it's in the form of this little paragraph template. It's very, very simple, right? But for each of the rows going across horizontally, you can use each of the 5 forms in order, as in this paragraph. Okay, so this is for the first person singular pronouns. I have a bicycle. Sally gave it to me. It is my bicycle. It is mine. I can ride it by myself. Right? I'm going to jump back to the previous slide here. And you can do that with the rest of the rows on the table. For instance, the second row, second person singular. You have a bicycle. Sally gave it to you. It is your bicycle. It is yours. You can ride that bicycle by yourself. And this is where also you can start seeing why you have some of the same forms in the different columns. For instance, the second person singular pronouns are the same for subject and object. We say, you have a bicycle, Sally gave it to you. This word you, it's the same whether it's subject or object. Go down to the third row. He has a bicycle, Sally gave it to him. It is his bicycle. It is his. He can ride that bicycle by himself. In this case, his and his in the possessive columns are the same. And this is where, if you haven't been aware of this, there are 2 possessive forms. You have first person singular, you have my and mine. Second person singular, you have your and yours. Well, when do we use the first form? When do we use the second? If you think about it, then you will realize that when it is followed by a noun, right, we use that first form, as in my bicycle. However, when it is not followed by a noun and the sentence just sort of ends, then we use the second form. It is mine. Okay, and just with that third person singular masculine, his and his, is the same. It is his bicycle. It is his. All right, and you can find lots of little things if you practice using this template to make these sentences. You can find lots of little interesting things like that maybe you've never really noticed before. Now, one thing I do want to point out, however, is the difference between second person singular up there on the second row and second person plural down there at the bottom row. Because many students believe that you only means you if there is one person. However, what do we often do in conversation? We will do things like you all, especially in the South where they like to say y'all, right? However, there's no reason necessarily to do that. If I say, you can do this, I could be talking to a single student, but if I say you can do this to the entire class, that is not incorrect, because you can mean all of you. It's just that sometimes we will add little words to indicate that we are addressing more than one person. However, I have to also point out here that this is where we often get sloppy with incorrect forms like use guys. And it's perfectly fine to say, hey, use guys, when you're just informally out there on the playground addressing your friends or whatever, but you really don't want to be making the mistake and thinking that that is a correct form when you're writing a composition for school purposes, because it is not a correct form. It's an informal conversational form. Okay, so and that's just once again, the expectation is that you guys have this table down, and I also should be able to say something. Okay, people, what is the first person plural reflexive pronoun? And you guys will say ourselves. And I should be able to say something like, what is the third person singular masculine object pronoun? And you guys will tell me him. It's very important and very useful for you to get these down so that we can clear up some of the little mistakes we frequently make with pronouns. So I'm going to be making you do that this year. One of the last things we want to talk about here, incorrect pronoun forms. We want to get rid of his self. Look it up in the dictionary. There's no his self. I'm sure I've said his self before. Hopefully I've never written his self. The correct form is himself. Another incorrect form, their self. There is no their self. Look it up. It doesn't exist. Again, these are forms that we use when we're speaking very quickly and casually. They should not appear in our writing. Ourself, same thing. Self is singular, our is plural. How can there be an ourself? There's only one form for that. It's ourselves. Themselves. Now wait a minute. That is a good one. What is that doing there? Okay, sorry, that was my mistake. Themselves is a good one. I think what I meant to write was their selves. Sorry. Their selves is correct. And then let's go back and, oh boy, I don't want to do that. View, present. So there we have the incorrect form, their selves. Mines! In certain parts of the country, you hear young people saying mines. It's mines all the time. Very common in Hawaii. There are other states, I think on the west coast and the southwest, where this is a conversational, informal form. Many students, however, do not know that it is not a formally correct form and should not appear in writing unless we are writing narrative that includes dialogue. That's fine when you put it in there, but otherwise we shouldn't see this word minds ever. And then all of the things that you usually see with apostrophes, they are wrong because pronouns never ever take apostrophes. Only nouns take apostrophes. When you say this word it's, what does that mean? IT apostrophe S, that means it is. It is not a correct possessive form. Same with these others. We should never see apostrophes, at least when we're talking about possessive pronouns here. Okay, guys, that is it for pronouns. Once again, I suspect that many of you are going to have to do a little bit of memory work to get the pronouns down. You will be happy that you did so. And we will talk about other types of pronouns, such as indefinite pronouns, for instance, a little further on in the year. But for right now, we're going to leave it with these three very important types: personal pronouns, possessive pronouns, reflexive pronouns. Possessive actually is a type of personal pronoun, so I really should just say personal, including subject, object, possessive, and reflexive/intensive pronouns. So, guys, stay tuned for Lesson 5, where we will come back to nouns and verbs because we need to talk about the parts of speech that describe or modify nouns and verbs, namely articles, adjectives, and adverbs. That's all for now, people. Take care.